What's up, airplane collectors? Welcome to a requested model review. It's your host Ray. In today's video, I'll be reviewing the Gemini Jet's 1-400 scale Delta Airlines Boeing 767-300 with no winglets. This model was released in 2017 or 2018 if my memory serves correctly, and as I said, this video is being made at the request of one of my subscribers. If you see a model in my collection that I haven't reviewed that you would like me to review, by all means drop that down below in the comment section and I'll produce that as soon as I can. In today's video, I'll talk about the box, then the model itself, and at the end of the video, I'll give my personal opinion about what I think of the model and whether or not I recommend it to other collectors. Starting off with the box is the standard Gemini Jet's narrow-body aircraft box at 15 centimeters lengthwise, 15 centimeters tall, and about 4.5 centimeters wide. I'll show you on the box now, so here's the front, bottom, right side, top, left side. And here's the back side. Take a moment to read this if you'd like to. This box features a flap that lets you see the model in its protective casing, and under the flap there's a bit of information about this aircraft and the Boeing 767. Take a moment to read this if you'd like to. And here's the model itself. I'll give you a quick 360 of the model so you can get a good look around it. The fuselage length for this model is about 13.5 centimeters, the wingspan is 12 centimeters, and it's about 4 centimeters tall. Relatively average size for a 1-400 scale aircraft, and it's also pretty heavy due to the fact that it's made primarily out of die-cast metal. Starting up the review at the front of the aircraft, here we can see the nose section of the fuselage. The nose shape on this aircraft is very nicely done. I don't see anything wrong with it. Really no complaints about the nose shape or any shapes up here. There's lots of printed detail to go around. You can see all sorts of logos and just printed details in general. All of it looks pretty good, no complaints so far. As you move down the fuselage, you can see more printed details, some of which look like stains, but they're actually not stains, which I found out later, which is actually quite nice. It shows that as much printed detail was included as possible. No complaints so far. Here's the vertical stabilizer. This looks pretty good. There's a decent amount of molded detail on there. The painting looks good, coloring looks good. No complaints at all on the left side. And same story on the right side of the fuselage. Overall, the fuselage quality on this model is really good, and it's really has nothing to complain about. The only thing that I really might see as a source of complaint is the cradle mold, which you can see a defined seam right here. But even then, the seam is very well hidden and it's hard to see at some angles, so I won't even complain about that. Moving on to the wings. The wings on this model are very nicely detailed with various painted, printed, and molded details. You can see the molded detail of the control surfaces is very defined. I don't really see any places where the paint fills in any of those molded details, which is fantastic. You can also see a section of gray reflective paint, which looks pretty good. I don't see any places where it overlaps or it bleeds over the edge of this printed detail here. And of course, the forward slats are also painted a different metallic gray. Very nicely done on the painting and the coloring on the wing here. No complaints at all. And on the other side of the wing, there even is some painted detail. This is not usual for most 1-400 scale airliners these days. There is some painted detail down here, lots of molded detail as well, but there's not really any printed detail because there's not really anything to print down here. So very nicely done on the wings as well. Moving to the rear of the aircraft, here we can see the APU and the horizontal stabilizers. The horizontal stabilizers are quite detailed compared to most other 1-400 scale aircraft. There's printed, painted, and molded detail on these. All of it looks really good. Here you can get a good look at it. Looks really nice. The APU is also very nice. There's even a little hole for the APU exhaust. And really, there's nothing to complain about back here. All of it looks really good and proportional to what it needs to be. Although I do see a bit of a paint application issue here on the bottom of the right vertical stabilizer. Oh, I'm sorry, horizontal stabilizer. There's a bit of inconsistency with the paint application there, but aside from that, all of it looks really good. Transitioning to the engines on this model, the engines on this model look really nice. There is a lot of detail on both the engine itself and the exhaust nozzle. You can see the exhaust nozzle has a bit of a printed section here for some sort of vent, if the camera would focus. There we go. You can see the vent right there. Looks pretty good. The exhaust nozzle is also painted nicely. And as for the fan blades, this is what the fan blades look like. The fan blades look really nice. They're painted a dark metallic gray, and they don't really have any details on them, but that's to be expected with this kind of model. The engines are pretty small, so no complaints on there. Here's a look at the bottom of the engines if you wanted to see it. On top, for looking from the top, there isn't that much printed detail, but here on the bottom you can see a bit more printed detail down here, which looks fantastic. Moving on to aerial features, this model features two antennas at the top of the fuselage. Both you can see here. They're about the same size. There's one at the front of the aircraft and one at the rear. These look good. They're not loose or anything, at least when I got my example, and they're applied very nicely. So no complaints on the aerial features. Aside from that, those are the only aerial features on this model, and I expect for there to be more, but I'm not really sure if there is more on this particular aircraft, so I really won't say anything about it. Another small detail that I noticed that was actually molded into the fuselage is this little section right here, which I'm not sure what this is, but there's a bit of a printed square around it, and then there's a small lump. So this is an included detail. I'm not sure if it would classify as an aerial feature, but I feel like it needs to be pointed out because it looks really good. Moving to the bottom of the aircraft, here we can see the landing gear as well as just the bottom section of the fuselage. Before I start talking about the landing gear, I'd like to talk about the cradle mold. You can see, of course, the defined seam that I mentioned earlier is more present down here. However, the seam line is really flush with the rest of the fuselage. So honestly, the fact that it's a cradle mold, it's very acceptable. So it looks really good. That's very nice to see. As for the landing gear on this model are very nicely detailed. Here we can see the main landing gear. The wheels do roll rather stiffly on some of the main gear. On this one, they roll really smoothly, but on this one, they're a bit stiff. But aside from that, the gears are very nicely detailed. They don't pivot, but that's really not a problem. And the nose gear also looks pretty nice. However, the wheel on the nose gear does not roll, unfortunately. Alright, here's the best view I could give at the front of the aircraft. Here we can see wing flex, gear balance, cockpit window printing, and all that good stuff. Wing flex on this model, it's a cradle mold, and this mold has always had good wing flex, and the wing flex on this model is very nice, so no complaints on the wing flex. Gear balance looks really good, everything looks symmetrical, engine clearance looks good, and I have no complaints on the gear balance. Cockpit window printing also looks symmetrical, which is rather surprising for Gemini jets, since as of recently, they haven't really been doing the best job at that. So it looks very nice. That's all I really have to say. There's really not much to complain about. And with that, the review of the model is over. Now time for my personal opinion and recommendation. As I said multiple times throughout the video and through multiple features, there really isn't that much to complain about. Even in 2023, for this model being produced years ago, it's very nicely detailed. Quality control seems to be very good. I'm not sure about any other examples having any issues with quality control. So yeah, this model is pretty much perfect, honestly, except for the fact that it has a cradle mold, which isn't really something desirable these days, but it's still acceptable, so I really won't complain about that. So I really like this model. I really think it's a great model to have. Unfortunately, this particular aircraft with the registration N143DA has been retired and is actually being scrapped. So it doesn't fly anymore, but it's still a great model here. So for my personal recommendation, I think you should get it. If you want to get this model, go for it. It's a very nice model, and I think any collector would appreciate to have it in their collection. Like me, I love this model. It's a very nice model. However, at the time of this video's producing, it's very rare. It's very hard to find without being under 100 US dollars at least. So if you want to get one, but good luck finding one. That's all I have to say. That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. As I said earlier, if you see any models in my collection that you'd like me to review that I haven't reviewed yet, by all means suggest those down below and I'll get those produced as soon as I can. And yeah, that's all I really have to say. Like, comment, and subscribe. Stay tuned for more model airplane and siren content if I get to it eventually. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in my next video.